When I got engaged, my mom said, "Don't be so dramatic, your sister's miscarriage matters more right now." At my own party, she toasted my sister's strength through loss. I took a deep breath, stood, and said, "She is strong. And that's why she helped me plan every detail of this." My sister cried into my arms. "I've been lurking here for years but never thought I'd actually post. This has been weighing on me for weeks, and honestly, I don't even know what I'm looking for: validation, advice, maybe just clarity." What happened at my engagement party has completely changed how I see my family, especially my mom. And while I don't regret speaking up, the emotional fallout is hitting harder than I expected. At my engagement party, my mom gave a toast, not to me, but to my sister for her strength through loss after a miscarriage. I stood up, acknowledged my sister's strength too, but also pointed out that she'd been the one who helped me plan every detail of the party while grieving. My sister broke down crying, hugged me in front of everyone, and now things with my mom are different. I don't know if we'll recover from it. We were sitting in my living room 2 weeks after the party. Me, my fiancé Rowan, and my younger sister Noelle. No one had said a word for a full minute. Then Rowan leaned forward and said, gently, "That toast wasn't okay." Noelle shook her head quickly. "Don't blame Mom. She doesn't always know how to handle things." "She knew exactly what she was doing," I said. My voice surprised even me, calm, but still under the surface. Noelle looked at me, and for the first time, didn't rush to defend her. "I'm sorry," she said instead. "For everything." That's when I knew I had to write this down. Not just for clarity, but because this whole thing has layers I'm still trying to unpack. I'm 34. My name's Celia. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I've always been the older daughter who held things together. The quiet one. The steady one. The achiever, if we're putting labels on it. My mom, Judith, is a very composed woman. Not cold exactly, but definitely the type who believes emotions are something to be managed, not expressed. After my dad died of pancreatic cancer nearly a decade ago, she sort of hardened into this shell of elegance and poise. She cries in the bathroom. She apologizes for nothing. She is, in many ways, the person I spent my 20s trying not to become. Then there's Noelle. She's 2 years younger than me, and she's always been delicate. Artistic. She did ballet into her 20s and now teaches yoga full-time. She married young to a guy named Parker, who always rubbed me the wrong way. Controlling, dismissive, sharp in ways that were hard to pin down unless you were paying close attention. I knew he wasn't good for her. But in our family, keeping the peace is the gold standard. If it doesn't come up at the dinner table, it doesn't exist. So I kept my thoughts to myself. When Noelle had a miscarriage earlier this year, it gutted her. She'd wanted that baby more than anything. Parker wasn't supportive. I could hear it in the things she didn't say, the way her voice would trail off whenever I asked how he was handling it. And then, 3 months later, Rowan proposed. It was perfect. A foggy overlook in Acadia National Park. Just us. I cried, he cried, we kissed, and I remember thinking for the first time in a long time, maybe everything is finally going to be okay. That illusion lasted about 4 days. When I called my mom to tell her, she sighed before I even finished the sentence. "Oh, Celia. That's lovely. But your timing, Noelle's still in so much pain. Let's try not to be so dramatic, okay?" That was the first crack. I should have said something then. I should have pushed back. But old habits die hard, and I just swallowed the disappointment like always. Noelle, for what it's worth, was kinder. She called the next day and told me she was happy for me. She even cried, part grief, part joy, and part apology. "I don't want this to ruin your moment," she said. And to her credit, she didn't. She jumped in to help with planning. When I told her I was thinking about doing a small engagement party before the wedding, she offered to handle the venue search. She helped me pick the colors, the catering, even my outfit for the night. She was my person during all of it. Mom, on the other hand? She barely contributed. No advice. No check-ins. No excitement. I kept thinking, maybe she's processing. Maybe she'll come around. Spoiler, she didn't. The party was beautiful. We hosted it in a historic home in Biltmore Village, whitewashed brick, ivy along the patio walls, strings of lights over the garden tables. About 40 people came, friends from college, Rowan's family from Connecticut, my coworkers. It was exactly what I'd hoped for. For a few hours, I even allowed myself to believe that everything was going to be okay. Until the toast. We had a few planned ones. Rowan's dad said something heartfelt. One of my friends told a hilarious story about how Rowan and I met. Then, unprompted, my mother stood up. She didn't look at me once. "I just want to take a moment," she said, lifting her glass, "to acknowledge the real strength it takes to endure a loss. Noelle has been through something unimaginable, and yet she carries herself with such grace and resilience. I think we can all learn from her example." To Noelle. The crowd clapped, a few people murmured to Noelle, and I stood there with a half-smile frozen on my face, feeling like I'd been slapped. I looked at Noelle. Her eyes were wide. She wasn't smiling. And that's when I snapped. Not loud. Not angry. Just done. I stood up and said, "She is strong. That's why she helped me plan every single part of this party. She picked the flowers. She chose the food. She wrote the invitations. She did all of that while grieving. That's how strong she is." The silence afterward was thick. Noelle stood up slowly and walked toward me. Her lip trembled. And then she started to cry, real, shaking, ugly crying. I held her, right there in front of everyone, as she collapsed into my arms. "Mom?" She sat back down. Face blank. No expression. After the party, she left early. Claimed a headache. Didn't say goodbye. Rowan held my hand all the way home. The days that followed were weird. Mom didn't reach out. "No, thank you for the party. No, sorry if that toast upset you." Nothing. But Noelle? She kept calling. Keep showing up. 2 weeks later, she told me she was leaving Parker. Apparently, the miscarriage was the final straw. "He never even held my hand," she said. "I was bleeding on the bathroom floor and he told me not to get it on the towels." She moved into a rental a few miles from me. I helped her decorate. She started smiling again. And I started seeing my mother more clearly than I ever had. She doesn't know how to support unless it earns her something. She only invests in pain she can leverage. And in Noelle's miscarriage, she saw a narrative she could control, one where she was the grieving grandmother, the strong matriarch holding the family together. My engagement didn't fit into that story. It wasn't hers to tell. So she ignored it. Or worse, she tried to rewrite it. I haven't spoken to her since the party. Noelle has, and apparently Mom's version of events is that I overreacted and made the night about myself. It was about me. About me and Rowan, about starting our lives together. About celebrating the future. But maybe the real problem is that she wasn't the one holding the microphone. I'm not sure what comes next. My wedding's in a few months. I don't know if I want her there. I keep going back and forth between guilt and relief at the idea of cutting her out of it. Would you? I don't know how you recover from something like this. And more than anything, I don't know if I want to. The hardest part wasn't the silence. It was the fact that I didn't miss her in it. After the party, everything felt oddly quiet, not just because my mom hadn't reached out, but because for the first time I wasn't craving her approval. I wasn't checking my phone waiting for a text from her. I wasn't imagining some grand apology that would make everything better. Instead, I started planning my wedding with Noelle by my side and Rowan at my back. And it was calm. peaceful, even. I had always imagined that wedding planning would be a minefield of tension, especially with a mom like mine. But without her involvement, it became something entirely different. Simple joys. Cake tastings with Noelle where we'd eat too much and laugh until we were almost sick. Rowan designed our wedding arch in his sketchbook, asking if I wanted to stain it darker or keep it natural. Choosing Fleetwood Mac for the first dance and realizing it made sense in a way no trendy pop song ever would. Still, it wasn't all sweetness. Noelle and I started seeing each other more, lunches, walks, even late-night calls. But grief has a way of clinging to her. There were moments when she would just go quiet, staring off into space. And I'd have to remind myself that her loss was still fresh. That it didn't disappear just because she left Parker or because she was helping with the wedding. One day, while we were stuffing RSVP cards into envelopes at my kitchen island, she paused mid-fold. "Do you think Mom was always like this?" she asked. I knew what she meant. The way Mom had centered herself in other people's pain. The way she had made Noelle's miscarriage the focal point of my engagement party. The way she acted like the victim whenever anyone called her out. I thought back to childhood, how our house always looked perfect, how I was told to lower my voice even when I was excited, how tears were for bedrooms and not living rooms. Noelle got away with more, but I think it was because Mom saw her as fragile. Something to mold, to protect, but never truly hear. "I think she always wanted control," I said. And when she couldn't control something, she found a way to narrate it. Noelle nodded. Like if she makes it about her, she doesn't have to feel powerless. I looked at her then, really looked. She had dark circles under her eyes she couldn't quite cover with makeup, and she'd lost weight. But she also seemed more grounded. Less like a ballerina trying to balance on a point, more like a woman finding her footing. "And we've been letting her," I said. "All this time." A few days later, Mom emailed me. Not called. Emailed. Subject: Wedding Celia, I hope the planning is going well. I wanted to check in on the invitation list. Have you finalized the guest count? Also, I know there was some misunderstanding at the party. It was a very emotional evening for everyone. I'd prefer to move forward rather than dwell on past moments. Please let me know if there's anything you'd like me to take care of. Mom, no apology. No acknowledgement. Just a carefully worded misunderstanding and a prompt to move on. I stared at it for a long time. My stomach tightened, not with anger, but with something duller. Fatigue. Resignation. I showed it to Rowan. He read it once and then again. "She doesn't want to talk about it," he said. "She wants you to sweep it under the rug so she can go back to being in charge." I knew he was right. But I also knew that if I didn't reply, it would become another strike against me. Another way I was being difficult. So I wrote back. "Hi Mom, thanks for checking in. The guest list is mostly finalized, we'll have around 75. I'll send you a copy once it's locked in. I appreciate the offer to help, but I've got it covered. Noelle's been a huge help, and Rowan's been amazing. As for the party, I'm not interested in pretending nothing happened. I'm not angry, but I need you to understand how that night felt for me. That toast was hurtful. I'm trying to move forward, but that doesn't mean ignoring it happened. I hope you can reflect on that. Celia." I sent it before I could overthink it. She didn't respond for 4 days. When she did, it was a single line. "I'm sorry you felt hurt." And that was it. That line haunted me. I'm sorry you felt hurt. Not, "I'm sorry I hurt you." Not, "I see now how it affected you." Just another way to sidestep. Noelle called it a non-apology. Rowan called it typical. I called it disappointing. But not surprising. The next time I saw her was at a family dinner my cousin hosted. It was a birthday thing, low-key, small, mostly extended family we rarely saw. I debated not going, but I also didn't want to cause more friction. When I walked in with Rowan, Mom was already there. She was holding court at the kitchen island, glass of white wine in hand, wearing one of her usual tasteful pastel sweater sets. She greeted me with a kiss on the cheek and a breezy, "Darling, you look so thin. Is wedding stress getting to you?" I smiled thinly. "I'm fine." I felt like I was floating through the evening, watching myself play a part in some scripted family sitcom. Rowan stayed close, his hand never far from mine. And when my cousin brought out dessert, Mom leaned in and said, "So have you and Noelle picked out the bridesmaid dresses yet?" I could tell from her tone she was trying. Maybe in her own way, this was her reaching out. But it felt transactional. Like an audition to be let back in. "She picked her own," I said. "She's the maid of honor." Mom blinked. "Oh?" I nodded. "She's earned it." She didn't reply. We haven't discussed it since. A few weeks later, Noelle dropped an explosive I hadn't expected. "I think I want to ask if I can read something at the ceremony." I looked up from the stack of menus I was reviewing. "Like a poem?" "Not exactly. I've been writing. I want to say something. Not about Parker, or the miscarriage. About you. About us." I didn't know what to say. My throat went tight. The idea of her speaking at the wedding wasn't what made me emotional, it was the fact that she wanted to. That she saw our bond as something worth speaking into existence, in front of everyone. "Of course," I said. "I'd love that." We're 6 weeks out from the wedding now. I don't know if my mom will show up and try to reclaim the spotlight again. I don't know if she'll try to deliver a speech or pull me aside with some grand overture. I'm trying to prepare for both possibilities, and also the possibility that she might do nothing at all. Which, honestly, might hurt more. But here's what I do know, this wedding isn't about proving anything to her. It's not about earning her approval. It's about Rowan, about me, and about the people who've actually been there, messy, complicated, flawed, but real. And it's about Noelle. About the way she held me up when she could barely hold herself up. About the way we started seeing each other clearly, maybe for the first time. If there's a spotlight at this wedding, it'll shine where it's earned. Not inherited. The 6 weeks leading up to the wedding blurred in that strange, surreal way time does when you're trying to stay present but your mind is constantly flipping through checklists and emotional landmines. Every time I crossed something off the planning spreadsheet, a new emotional trigger appeared in its place. I wasn't overwhelmed by logistics, I was overwhelmed by the waiting. Waiting for my mom to say something real. Waiting for her to acknowledge what she'd done. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. But Mom stayed quiet. She didn't push herself into the planning. She didn't ask to see the dress. She didn't ask about seating charts or offer suggestions. Just small, distant texts. "Do you still want me to wear navy? What time does the rehearsal start? Will there be valet parking?" If you'd looked at the texts out of context, you'd think we were just two women exchanging polite information. But there was an emotional vacancy behind every message. No warmth. No curiosity. And I didn't push. Instead, I leaned further into the people who showed up fully. Noelle and I met for lunch every Sunday, like a ritual. She had started therapy, started going on walks alone, even mentioned trying an art class. "This part of my life feels so quiet," she said once while we shared a beet salad and iced tea. "But not empty. Just mine." I understood what she meant. For both of us, there had always been a current of performing, being the daughter Mom needed at the moment. Now we were both trying to figure out who we were without that narrative. Even Rowan noticed. "You two have a rhythm now," he said one night as we lay in bed, him tracing lazy shapes on my shoulder. "It's like you were out of sync for years, and now you're finally in tune." I smiled into his chest. I think we stopped trying to fix each other. It wasn't always smooth. We had our moments, like when Noelle panicked over what to wear to the rehearsal dinner and broke down in my apartment, certain she was going to mess something up. But she always came back. She always tried. Mom, on the other hand, stayed in the background. Present but absent. Like a shadow in every room we walked into. 2 weeks before the wedding, she asked to meet for coffee. I hesitated. The last time we'd been one-on-one was before the engagement party. Back when I still believed that maybe, just maybe, she'd surprise me. But I said yes. Part curiosity. Part masochism. Mostly a habit. We met at a little cafe downtown that served overpriced lattes and had a wall of exposed brick she'd probably silently judged. She was already sitting when I arrived, perfect posture, cardigan neatly folded over her chair. She stood to kiss my cheek, which felt strange, formal. "Hi, darling," she said. "Hey." We sat. There was a pause. Then, "You look tired." "I'm planning a wedding." "Right." Another pause. She finally spoke. "I wanted to check in before the big day. See if you need anything. Help with anything." Her tone was controlled. Smoothed down, like a suit pressed within an inch of its life. I took a sip of my coffee. "Everything's handled. Noelle and Rowan have been amazing." I said it without malice, but I watched her blink. She didn't flinch, didn't protest, just nodded. "That's good," she said, voice neutral. "You've always been independent." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how she made it sound like a character flaw I'd grown out of. "I didn't invite you here to argue," she continued, as if anticipating a fight I hadn't even hinted at. "I just want your wedding to be beautiful." "It will be," I said. "Because it's about the right things." That landed somewhere behind her eyes, but she didn't let it show. After a few beats, she reached into her purse and slid an envelope across the table. Cream-colored, heavy. "I wanted you to have this. It's your grandmother's bracelet. I thought maybe you'd wear it." I looked at it but didn't touch it. She kept her hand on the envelope for a moment too long before withdrawing it. "You know," she said softly, "I did think about your engagement party. After." I waited. I suppose I wasn't as mindful as I could have been. I only meant to honor Noelle's strength. I didn't think it would come across as ignoring yours. It wasn't an apology. But it wasn't a complete deflection either. More like someone who read an article about emotional accountability and was trying it on like a coat in a dressing room. "You did ignore mine," I said, voice steady. "But what hurt more was that you didn't even realize it until people started reacting." She didn't deny it. Just looked down at her coffee, then back at me. "I'm not good at emotional things." "I know." It hung there, between us, like condensation on a window. "I do love you, Celia," she said finally. "I know," I replied. "But love without acknowledgement doesn't always feel like love." She blinked hard. Then, quietly, "Will I be seated in the front row?" "Yes." She nodded. "Then I'll see you there." We parted with a hug that felt more like two mannequins touching shoulders. She didn't mention the bracelet again. I didn't open the envelope until that night. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet with tiny sapphire accents. My grandmother's birthstone. I held it in my palm for a long time, wondering how many expectations came with wearing it. I still haven't decided whether I will. The week of the wedding arrived in a haze of final fittings, table assignments, and last-minute emails. Noelle came over with a steaming pot of homemade lentil soup and stayed the night on my couch. We watched movies in our pajamas and folded ceremony programs on the coffee table. She pulled out a notebook around midnight and said, "I think I'm ready." "For what?" "To show you the speech." She handed me the notebook with a quiet ceremony. I read it once, then twice. It was beautiful. Raw, honest, laced with childhood memories, and full of words that made my eyes sting. There was a line that stood out. "I used to think being the fragile one meant I needed saving. But I think Celia taught me that being strong means showing up even when you're broken." She never stopped showing up, not for me, not for herself. I looked up at her, speechless. I meant every word, she said. I know. We sat in silence for a long time, side by side, both of us quietly understanding the miracle of being seen after years of invisibility. I could feel the weight of what was coming. The wedding wasn't just going to be a celebration. It was going to be a reckoning. Not with drama or explosions, but with truths that had been buried for too long. The version of our family that lived in my mom's curated stories was dissolving, and in its place, something truer was trying to grow. Not cleaner. Not prettier. But real. And the ceremony was just days away. The wedding day arrived warm and golden. Late September in the Blue Ridge Mountains is its own kind of magic, summer's end holding hands with early fall, sun glinting through the tips of leaves just starting to turn amber and red. The vineyard shimmered under that kind of light that makes everything feel like it matters more. I woke up before dawn, not out of nerves, but clarity. My dress hung on the door like it had been waiting its whole life to become part of this day. I slipped into a robe and sat by the window, sipping coffee, watching fog stretch across the valley. Noelle knocked gently around 7 a.m. I hadn't even heard her arrive. She wore a dusty rose wrap and carried 2 cups of coffee and a zippered garment bag. She smiled sleepily, and when she saw my eyes were already misty, she just said, "I brought mascara, don't cry yet." We got ready together, like sisters should. The makeup artist commented on how similar our features were, and Noelle laughed. She got the ambition, I got the emotional range. The ceremony was set for late afternoon. Guests arrived slowly, winding up the long gravel path to the open-air venue, set between rows of grapevines. A wooden arch, hand-built by Rowan, stood at the edge of the ceremony lawn, draped in flowing fabric and blush flowers. I peeked through the bridal suite window as people took their seats. Rowan stood near the altar, adjusting his tie, laughing with his brother. I saw my college roommate arrive, then an aunt I hadn't seen in 5 years. Then I saw my mom. She wore navy, of course. Elegant, expensive. Hair done in that signature chignon she wore to every important event in her life. She looked polished, almost statuesque. But when she sat down in the front row, she looked small. Not frail. Just out of place. She wasn't surrounded by the usual attention. She wasn't directing anything. The ceremony began. Noelle walked first, alone, as my maid of honor. She walked slowly and steadily. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked at me. Her eyes shimmered. And then it was my turn. I stepped out on my dad's old garden path arm in arm with Rowan's mother. A small rebellion. My mom hadn't even asked who'd walk me down the aisle, and I didn't offer it. Instead, I gave the role to someone who had actually nurtured me with kindness in these last months. The vows were personal. Rowan choked up. I cried harder. The audience laughed when I made a joke about his garage tools overtaking our apartment. There was nothing performative, just us. Real. Then came the reception. Dinner was served under a canopy of string lights. Guests toasted with local wine. Laughter echoed. Plates were cleared. Music played softly under the stars. And then I stood to give a short speech. I hadn't planned to. But I needed to say something, not for Mom, but for myself. I lifted my glass and let the silence come to me instead of trying to fill it. Thank you all for being here tonight. I want to say something about resilience. About strength. About showing up. I paused. A few months ago, my sister experienced a loss I wouldn't wish on anyone. And she didn't hide. She didn't disappear. She chose to show up, for me, for Rowan, for this day. Everything you see here tonight, she helped create. Every flower, every invitation, every chaotic vendor meeting. She planned this while grieving. That is strength. That is love. Noelle's hands flew to her mouth, already trembling. Her eyes were wet. I continued. But I also want to say something to those who have confused performance for presence. Applause for attention. Sometimes, the loudest voice in the room isn't the one with the most heart. It's just the one most afraid of silence. I didn't look directly at my mother, but the weight of my words fell like velvet stones across the crowd. Today is not about pain. It's about choosing joy in the aftermath of it. It's about building something beautiful with the people who show up, again and again, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I raised my glass. To the ones who show up. The crowd stood. Glasses clinked. Applause swelled. And my mother? She clapped, slowly. Alone. Eyes dry. Face unreadable. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the center of a story. And I think she knew it. Later in the evening, as Noelle gave her planned speech, the emotional tables turned completely. She began by reading from her notebook, her voice trembling but steady. For most of my life, I've been called sensitive. Delicate. But what they meant was, easier to silence. My sister never silenced me. Even when I disappeared into pain, she left a door open. She didn't fix me. She sat beside me. She turned to me directly. Celia, you reminded me that grief isn't shameful. That strength isn't loud. That love isn't always words, it's being willing to listen, to wait, and to stay. At the end, the crowd was on their feet again. But my mother remained seated, arms crossed. Rowan leaned over and whispered, that was the real toast. The last piece of the evening that sealed it all was a quiet moment, no audience, no clinking glasses. As the night wore down and the dance floor cleared, I sat on a bench near the edge of the vineyard, watching the lanterns sway in the breeze. My heels were off. My curls had started to fall. My mom approached. She stood for a moment before sitting beside me. We didn't speak right away. I suppose I should say congratulations, she said eventually. You don't have to, I replied. She nodded. Well. That was quite a speech. I didn't answer. I didn't expect it. From either of you. I turned to her. That's the problem. Another silence. Then she asked, not cruelly, just plainly, so. What now? I smiled faintly. Now? We stopped pretending. I stood. I'm not cutting you out, Mom. But I'm not minimizing myself anymore to keep you comfortable. I don't need a mother who gives me advice. I need someone who listens. She didn't follow me when I walked away. In the months that followed, she became quieter. Not cold, just less present. Fewer calls. Less commentary. I think she realized her spotlight had shifted, and I wasn't going to hand it back. Noelle and I continued to grow closer. She enrolled in an art therapy program. We text daily. She's learning how to be alone without being lonely. As for me, I live in a house with the man I love, surrounded by the life I chose, not the one someone crafted for me. And for the first time, my joy is not a footnote to someone else's sorrow. Because the best revenge? Is a life where I don't need her approval.